When Elijah Brooks called to ask about his son's wedding date, his new daughter-in-law laughed softly and said, "Oh, we got married yesterday, only invited special people." He stared at the phone, the same one he used to pay their rent each month. That night, he opened his ledger, drew a single line through their names, and whispered, "No more." He didn't know that refusal, simple, quiet, polite, would ignite a 6-month battle over his sanity, his savings, and the right to make his own choices. Elijah Brooks had always believed in order. The kind of man who rose before the sun, folded his newspaper with military precision, and lined his shoes by the door without ever needing to glance down. At 68, the retired postal supervisor lived alone in the modest house he and his late wife, Margie, had once filled with laughter, holiday casseroles, and years of quiet, mutual understanding. The hum of the ceiling fan above him was constant, a soft white noise that seemed to keep time with his thoughts. The house was tidy, disciplined, like him. Each drawer had its purpose, every receipt had its place. His ledger, the handwritten expense book he'd kept for decades, sat open beside the morning's cooling coffee. This wasn't just record-keeping, it was memory, proof that he still had agency in a world that sometimes moved too fast and forgot to look back. Elijah checked the mail slot, hoping for utility bills, maybe a newsletter from the local church. No letters, just the familiar hush of a quiet house. The silence pressed in gently, not oppressive, but noticeable. Margie had passed 5 winters ago. His only son, Damon, visited less and less. And yet, Elijah still made breakfast each morning. A few strips of bacon, 1 egg over easy, toast without butter. He didn't always eat it all, but he cooked it just the same. The sizzle of bacon, the soft click of the stove knob, the distant birdsong outside. These were the rhythms that kept him tethered. "Still got things to do," he murmured, mostly to himself. That was enough. A photograph on the fridge caught his eye as he poured his coffee. Damon, college graduation, cap slightly crooked, arm around a young woman. Pride and regret swirled in Elijah's chest. Damon had once shown promise. A literature teacher with a warm voice and a talent for making bored students care about old words. But something in the years since had unraveled. Jobs didn't stick. Calls came less often. And Elijah had kept paying the rent, the phone bills, the car insurance. "One day you'll find your footing, boy," he said softly, smoothing the photo's curling corner. The magnet clicked faintly as he pressed it back into place. It sounded like a heartbeat. The phone buzzed, a group message. He wiped his hands and reached for it. Liana Cruz, Damon's fiancée. Bright, polished, always planning something. Elijah had met her a handful of times. Kind enough, though a little too rehearsed. The message was short. "We got married yesterday." Attached was a photo. Liana in white lace, beaming, and Damon beside her, grinning like a schoolboy. Elijah stared at the screen. The coffee smell turned sour in his nose. "Yesterday," he said, the word barely above a whisper. He sat down slowly, the ledger still open beside the phone. The phone buzzed again. More photos. Hashtags. Just married. Love wins. Chosen family. Elijah opened his laptop, typed Liana's name into the social feed. Post after post. Pictures of the beach ceremony, the white gazebo, the curated smiles. Caption after caption thanked the guests for making the day so special. His name wasn't among them. "Special people, huh?" he said, the words scraping his throat on the way out. He reached for his ledger, flipped past entries, groceries for Damon, a $600 car repair, the last 3 months' rent labeled under support. He turned to the newest page. At the top, he'd already scrawled Damon and Liana. Elijah took his pen and drew one clean line straight through their names. The ink was dark, the sound of the pen scratching steady as his breath. No more. The house dimmed as the sun dipped. Outside, porch lights blinked on across the neighborhood. Elijah stood by the window, watching the warm rectangles of other families' homes flicker to life. Old guilt stirred. Was cutting them off cruel? Wasn't it a father's job to support his child, even when they stumbled? He spoke aloud this time. Cruel was leaving me out. The ceiling fan swayed the curtain. Its hum was slower now. He let it calm him. A knock at the door pulled him from the silence. Eleanor Tate stood on the porch, holding a tin of cornbread. She was 70, sharp-eyed with a voice like worn denim. Elijah's neighbor of nearly 2 decades, a retired nurse, widow, grandmother. The two shared unspoken understanding, a kind of quiet alliance forged over shared fence repairs and the occasional potluck. "You look like a man who just swallowed bad news," she said, stepping inside before he could muster a protest. He started to speak, then stopped. She set the tin on the counter and opened it without ceremony. The smell of warm butter filled the kitchen. "They got married," he said finally. "Didn't invite me." Eleanor nodded, not in surprise, but in recognition. She didn't offer a platitude. She didn't ask questions. She just stood there, letting the weight settle. After a long silence, she said, "Then maybe you start living for yourself, Elijah." He didn't answer. But as the fan hummed overhead and the scent of cornbread filled the space, something in his shoulders loosened. The day ended the way it began, in quiet. But this time, Elijah folded his ledger closed, placed his pen atop it, and let the last light of day rest on the cover. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. The hum of the fan filled the space where laughter once lived. And for the first time in a long while, he let it be enough. 2 weeks passed before Elijah saw Damon again. The knock came just after 10 on a Saturday, soft but steady. Elijah was rinsing out his coffee mug when he heard it. He wasn't expecting anyone. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door. There they were, Damon and Liana, smiling like news anchors, each holding a brown grocery bag. "Hey, Pops," Damon said, trying for casual. "We brought a few things," Liana added, voice bright. "Hope it's not too early." Elijah stepped back, gesturing them in. "Didn't expect company this early." The plastic rustled as they walked past him. Liana's perfume left a faint trace in the air, sweet and sharp. Damon set the bags on the kitchen counter, right next to the stovetop where burnt coffee still clung to the pot. The space felt tighter than usual. "So clean in here," Liana said, after a pause. She glanced around, her eyes settling on the open ledger beside the salt shaker. "You keep everything so tidy, Mr. Brooks." Elijah noticed the angle of her gaze. It wasn't admiration, it was measurement. He didn't close the ledger. Let her see it. Let her see that structure lived here, not frailty. He tapped his pencil once on the paper. The sound was small, deliberate. "We try," he said. Liana reached into her bag, pulled out a neatly folded document, and laid it flat on the table. The top line read in bold letters, "Durable power of attorney." "It's just a form," she said quickly. "Makes things easier, paying bills, accessing accounts in case of emergency." Elijah scanned the heading. His heart tightened, like a fist clenching without permission. "I appreciate the thought," he said carefully, his fingers brushing the edge of the paper. "But I'll manage." The sheet crackled softly as he slid it back toward her. Not harsh, just firm. Liana's smile froze for a beat before softening again. Damon busied himself unloading a carton of eggs and a box of cereal from the bag. They didn't stay long. A little small talk, a comment about the weather. Then they were gone. Elijah sat down at the table once more. He opened his ledger, flipped to the current week, and wrote in clean block letters. POA offered. Declined. His hand trembled slightly as he underlined it. Once, then again. Best keep record. That night, the phone rang. Damon. Hey, Pops. Elijah leaned back in his chair. The receiver buzzed faintly against his ear. The wall clock ticked above him. She didn't mean anything by it, Damon said. Liana just wants to help. There it was. The guilt. It leaked through his son's voice, whether he meant it to or not. Son, Elijah said evenly, help starts with trust, and I still got mine. The silence on the other end was heavier than the words. They said goodnight soon after. A few days later, Eleanor tapped a message open on her phone. It was from Liana. He'll sign soon if we act nice. Meant for Damon, no doubt. Sent to her by mistake. Eleanor sat back in her armchair, screen glowing faintly in the dim room. She didn't respond, didn't delete it either. Somebody's playing a dangerous game, she muttered. Elijah found himself at the community center the following afternoon. The flyer on the bulletin board read, "Free legal help for seniors. No appointment needed." He almost turned around. Pride flared in his chest. He wasn't the kind of man who needed lawyers, but something Liana had said, the way her fingers touched the edge of that form like it belonged to her already, he couldn't let it go. Inside, a young woman in a maroon blazer sat behind a folding table. "I'm Mona Keller," she said. "You must be Mr. Brooks." Her tone was plain, no frills, and something about that steadied him. "I'm not in trouble," he said quickly. "Just got questions." "Law's not about fear, Mr. Brooks," she replied, scribbling something on a yellow pad. "It's about keeping your voice." She led him to a whiteboard in the next room. No one else was there. She uncapped a marker. 5 parts of a legal filing, she said, writing in block letters. Filing, notice, assessment, hearing, judgment. Elijah frowned. It all sounded distant, cold. But he took out a small notepad and copied the words down, neatly, underlined assessment. "If they ever file something crazy," Mona said, "we'll answer with order." The message came later that evening. Damon again. "We're setting up a joint account tomorrow. Just makes sense." Elijah sat with the phone in his palm, thumb hovering over the screen. His heartbeat was steady. No rush. He typed slowly. No joint accounts. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Then he forwarded the message to Mona. That night, beneath the ceiling fan, Elijah opened his ledger again. The room was quiet, but not empty. His expense book sat beside him. Each line mattered now. Each word written down gave him weight. The ache tugged. He was losing his family, or maybe they were already gone. But he was still here. "This time, I'll stay in charge," he said to the still room. The fan's slow whir answered him, steady as his resolve. Night hummed through the house. The fan turned overhead, and the pages of Elijah's ledger fluttered once, like a quiet warning of storms still to come. The envelope slid through the mail slot just after 9. Elijah heard it before he saw it, a solid thump against the tile, too thick to be a flyer, too formal to be junk. He walked over slowly, bent to pick it up. County seal, his name typed in block letters. Return address, probate court. He opened it right there in the hall. The paper inside was crisp, stamped. The heading read, "Petition for Temporary Guardianship." Elijah stood still. The ceiling fan above hummed steadily, marking each heartbeat. He closed the letter with shaking hands and walked to the kitchen, phone in his other hand. He dialed Mona Keller. "They actually filed it, Ms. Keller," he said, voice even. At her office downtown, Mona flipped open the file with practiced calm. She scanned the stamped date and pulled up the digital docket. "Notice duly served," she confirmed. Hearings in 30 days. That's our window to prove capacity. She circled the date on her whiteboard, the marker squeaking loud in the quiet room. They went through the exhibits one by one, bank statements, transaction summaries. And then, tucked between two forms, Elijah saw it. A letter from his old physician. Not damning, but loaded. Patient demonstrates signs of possible mild cognitive decline. Recommend further assessment. It cut deeper than he expected. A paper with his name calling him less than whole. Mona watched his face. We'll answer possible with proof, she said, voice level. She clipped the papers into a folder, each page whispering like distant leaves. 2 days later, Elijah climbed the stairs to Damon's apartment. The complex was newer, built with plastic siding and empty balconies. He knocked once. The door cracked. Damon's eyes darted past him before meeting his gaze. I'm staying here a few days, he muttered. Don't want trouble. Say it quick. Elijah stayed calm. Did you know about the petition? Inside, the air smelled like reheated takeout and old fabric. A TV buzzed faintly in another room. It was her idea, Damon said after a pause. She said it keeps you safe. Elijah nodded once. Safe from what? He asked, but Damon didn't answer. Back home, Eleanor knocked around dusk. She didn't come empty-handed. She meant to send it to Damon, she said, holding out her tablet. Ended up in my inbox by mistake. The screen glowed in her lined hands. The message read, He'll sign soon if we act nice. Elijah sighed. A text won't hold in court. Eleanor smiled dryly. Chain of custody, sugar. She handed him a folder. Screenshot. Timestamp. Sender number. Digital export file. And a notarized affidavit with SHA 256 hash. Truth needs a trail. The next week, a licensed psychologist arrived at Elijah's home. A middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like a metronome. Capacity evaluation. Elijah didn't bristle. He answered each question clearly, finished every task. No flair, no fuss. Just another form to fill, he joked near the end. The pen scratched steadily on paper. Confidence built in small strokes. Meanwhile, Mona had been building her own case. She organized Elijah's bank disbursements, cross-referencing them with dates on Damon and Liana's social feeds. A photo of a new watch, a weekend spa trip, a leased sedan. Lifestyle speaks louder than ledgers, she murmured, fingers flying over the keyboard. But access to Damon's full accounts? Still blocked. One afternoon, Elijah sat across from her while she walked him through the guardianship process again. Filing, notice, exam, hearing, judgment, she said, tapping each word on the board. Elijah rubbed his temples. The terms spun like gears. Least restrictive options first, she reminded him. That's the law and our shield. He copied the list into his notebook, underlining each word. The ink dried beneath his thumb. That night, Elijah stood in his hallway. He opened the drawer in the side table and pulled out his old postal badge. Still polished, still weighty. He slid the guardianship envelope beneath it. The cool brass pressed against his fingers. Doubt flickered. What if they won? He whispered into the silence. Truth doesn't tremble. He closed the drawer gently. They'll see I'm still me. Thunder murmured beyond the window. The badge glinted under lamplight, dignity polished by stormlight. Mona's office hummed with quiet industry. She and her paralegal, a wiry woman named Bree, moved methodically through stacks of files. Each piece of evidence, doorbell video, screenshots, receipts, was labeled, logged, and sealed. Staplers clicked like metronomes. Chain of custody forms were initialed one by one. Elijah sat on the side, watching the rhythm. Feels like overkill, he said, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. Mona glanced up with a smile. Paper trails keep peace. Another stapler snap echoed. Let them see order, not anger. They played back Eleanor's doorbell footage next. The video began with a cheerful chime, then Liana's syrupy voice. Just sign first, Daddy Brooks. We'll handle the rest. The sound of it made Elijah's gut twist. Her tone, sweet as varnish, was the same one she'd used when dropping off groceries. It felt like hearing a script. He nodded to Mona. Keep it in. That's enough, he whispered as the clip ended. In another folder, Mona stacked Elijah's bank withdrawal slips, matching them against the couple's luxury posts and receipts. Same day, same vendors, spa packages, tailored clothes, dinners with wine pairings. Damon's own bank data was still sealed. No court order yet. But Mona noted Damon's brief nod during mediation and filed a motion for limited production. The printer hummed as pages emerged warm and thick. Every dollar leaves footprints, Mona said, bundling the papers. That evening, Elijah sat on Eleanor's porch. She handed him a steaming cup of sweet tea. My grandson tried to sell my house last year, she said. Didn't even blink when I said no. Thought I'd forget by morning. Elijah flinched, not at her story, but how close it hit. What did you do? I spoke up, she said. Got the deed redone and filed a police report. Speaking up saved me. She looked him dead in the eye. Now it's your turn. A few days later, Damon showed up. No warning. Just appeared on the porch, holding a crumpled $20 bill. Just wanted to give this back, he said, for the groceries you left last month. Shame was thick in his voice. His eyes didn't lift. Elijah took the bill, paper soft against his calloused fingers. Keep your dignity, son. He didn't say more, didn't need to. At a preliminary hearing, Elijah's old doctor took the stand. Mona had subpoenaed him. Under oath, the physician shifted. The phrase, possible decline. Liana asked me to include it. I didn't feel comfortable refusing. He tapped his pen once on the mic. The note was speculative, he admitted. Mona filed the transcript as Exhibit C. That night, Liana posted a filtered photo of a candlelit dinner. Hashtag stacked beneath it. Family first. Gratitude. Damon saw it while scrolling in bed. He stared at the image, thumb hovering. He didn't click like. Maybe we went too far, he whispered. Mediation followed. Mona brought her plan. Elijah would set up auto pay for 2 major bills and add a trusted contact to his bank. Minimal, respectful, legally sound. Liana declined. No counteroffer. The secretary's note read, respondents reject less restrictive plan. Chair legs scraped against tile as the room emptied. Then we'll let the judge decide, Mona said. As court drew closer, Mona drilled Elijah on answers. Short, clear, honest. She explained possible cost shifting. If the petition lacked merit, the filers might owe fees. His hands trembled slightly as they practiced. He placed one palm on his old postal badge. Cool metal grounded him. We win by staying calm, Mona said. Truth does the heavy lifting. That night, Elijah stood by his front door, key in hand. He locked it slowly, feeling the click echo through the house. He placed the evidence folder next to his badge on the side table. They can test me, he whispered, but they can't define me. The house settled into its familiar quiet. Tomorrow, I stand on my own feet. Outside, streetlights hum like courtroom fluorescents waiting to switch on. Inside, Elijah's ledger lies open under the fan, proof that order can fight back without raising its voice. Elijah stood on the courthouse steps before the building even opened. He held a thin folder against his chest, stamped in red ink, Notice of Hearing, June 10th. The marble beneath him was cold, the early light gray and flat. Every echo of his steps inside reminded him, this wasn't a small misunderstanding. It was formal now, official, on record. He glanced at the security guard, nodded, and passed through the metal detector, past the directory, up the stairs. He straightened his jacket before reaching the double doors of courtroom 4B. His shoes clicked across the waxed floor. "Keep your line straight," he murmured to himself. Inside, the benches were polished but old. Brass scuffed, upholstery faded at the corners. He sat in the second row, folder in his lap. Liana and Damon arrived 10 minutes later. Grocery bag smiles. She wore pearl earrings. He wore gilt. Neither looked at Elijah. "All rise," called the bailiff. Judge Henry McCall entered, robe swaying slightly. He settled into the high-backed chair behind the bench. Gavel struck twice. "This court is now in session." Petitioner's counsel stood. Bryce Langley, trim, expensive watch, measured concern. "Elijah Brooks is a man we respect," he began, "but the signs of diminished capacity are clear. Late fees, withdrawals inconsistent with spending history, isolation, vulnerability to coercion, financial recklessness." Each word felt like a chisel. Elijah clenched his jaw. He could feel Mona glance toward him from the table. "We seek guardianship only for his safety," Langley concluded, folding his hands. Mona stood next. Her movement was quiet but deliberate. She opened her folder and pulled out the first tab. "Mr. Brooks has lived alone since 2011, she said. "He pays every bill on time, by auto-pay. He maintains an itemized expense ledger. He underwent a full cognitive assessment last month. No decline, no dementia, no impairment." She turned, facing the judge directly. "He doesn't need control. He needs respect." The folder slid softly across the table as she submitted her exhibits. The judge gave nothing away. "Call your first witness," he said. The family doctor took the stand. He adjusted his glasses, settled his notes. "Did you write this letter?" Langley asked, holding up the possible decline note. "I did," the doctor replied. Langley smiled. "So, you stand by it?" The doctor's voice didn't waver. The phrase "possible decline" was added at the petitioner's request. It was not a diagnosis. Mr. Brooks showed no clinical symptoms at that visit. Langley tried again. "But wouldn't you agree it's prudent to be cautious?" "I agree with facts, not fear," the doctor said. The microphone hummed as he leaned back. Mona introduced her evidence next. Expense books, neatly labeled. Capacity report, signed and dated. Auto-pay confirmations. The clerk requested verification. Mona's paralegal, Bree, stood. "Custodian of records, all originals authenticated and prepared for admission." "Exhibits A through E are admitted," the clerk announced. Keyboard clacks followed. Then came the USB. The bailiff cracked the seal. Bree confirmed the original file hash. The video played. Liana's voice filled the room. "Just sign first, Daddy Brooks. We'll take care of the rest." Syrupy. Practiced. She shifted in her seat. Damon stared at his shoes. Langley started to rise, but the judge raised a hand. "The court will draw its own conclusions." Elijah didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the screen until it went black. Damon fidgeted. His hand twisted the gold wedding band around his finger. He leaned sideways. "He's tired, not crazy," he muttered, eyes down. Langley whispered, "Stay quiet." Elijah noticed, but said nothing. His silence was a wall. Recess. In the hallway, Mona handed him a cup of coffee. His fingers trembled. The lid rattled. He pressed the cup against his coat pocket, grounding himself on the badge inside. "You're doing fine," she said. "Order is winning." He nodded. "I didn't raise my voice." "You didn't need to." Back inside, the room reset. The judge reviewed the exhibits again, fingers steepled. The bailiff called time. "The court will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow," Judge McCall said. Gavel fell once. The room stirred. People stood, papers rustled. Liana's eyes trailed Elijah as he walked past. No smile now, just calculation. He didn't give her the dignity of a reaction. Outside, pigeons scattered from the courthouse steps. The sun had shifted, throwing long slashes of shadow across the concrete. He paused before reaching the street. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "truth finishes the route." The courthouse lights glowed behind him like sentinels. The countdown clock quietly ticks toward judgment. Elijah was on the courthouse steps before the sun cleared the neighboring roofs. He held the same folder, squared to his chest. The paper inside was dog-eared now, but the creases were straight, the tabs still labeled. One last day, he told himself. One last room to hold his name up high. Humidity clung to his neck, made his collar sag. His feet hurt before he took a single step inside. The elevator dinged. As it opened, he caught his reflection in the brushed steel doors, jaw set, eyes calm. "Stay steady," he muttered. The courtroom was emptier than yesterday, but the tension came back fast. Damon sat rigid at the table. Liana whispered something into his ear, adjusting her bracelet, but his hands didn't move. Mona leaned in as Elijah sat beside her. "They'll go hard today," she said. "Expect performative concern. Just tell the truth. Short answers, straight lines." He nodded, clasped his hands in his lap. "All rise," called the bailiff. Judge McCall entered. 2 knocks of the gavel. Liana was called first. She walked like she'd practiced, crossed her legs, smiled like she was selling something too sweet. "I love Mr. Brooks like family," she said. "That's why we brought this petition. We've seen signs, forgetfulness, repeated questions, mixed up numbers." Mona waited, arms folded lightly. "You said he forgot rent dates," Mona said, once the clerk stopped typing. "Can you name one?" December." Mona flipped open a record. "Mr. Brooks hasn't manually handled rent since 2017. He uses auto-pay through Forest Pines Leasing. December 2nd cleared on time." Liana blinked. "Which year were you referring to?" Liana's eyes darted. "Maybe it was January." January was paid on the 1st, confirmed by the leasing office. Silence hung for 3 beats too long. The judge's eyebrow lifted. He wrote something. The pen squeaked. "Strike that," Liana whispered. "Next." Mona laid out the matching timelines. Elijah's cash withdrawals and the couple's luxury purchases. Designer tags, new electronics, all posted within hours of their visits. Langley stood. "Your Honor, we object. Relevance." "Overruled," McCall said. "The timeline shows a pattern. Proceed." Damon was next. His suit wrinkled, voice faint. Mona's tone didn't change. "Did your father ever miss a rent or utility payment?" Damon shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am." "And did he ever write you a check you asked him not to?" A pause. "No." "Thank you. No further questions." The court brought in the independent evaluator. "Mr. Brooks scored above average on all sections," he said, flipping pages. He exhibited clear understanding of dates, figures, logic tests, and daily function. Langley leaned forward. "Isn't it true, though, that Mr. Brooks could have masked symptoms during the exam?" The evaluator didn't blink. "Hypothetically, yes, but I've administered over 200 of these in my career. Mr. Brooks showed no deception. He demonstrated clarity and consistency." McCall reviewed the report. Findings accepted. Then the court clerk unsealed the USB again. Bree verified the retention chain and digital hash. The video clip returned. Just a few seconds. Liana's voice echoed through the courtroom again. "Just sign first, Daddy Brooks. We'll take care of the rest." Langley stood. They were speaking informally. McCall held up his hand. "Let the record reflect tone and intent." Damon slumped further. Didn't meet anyone's eyes. Your Honor, Mona said, I'd like to remind the court that Mr. Brooks offered a less restrictive plan. Auto pay setup for all major bills and 2 named emergency contacts. The petitioners declined. McCall pulled the mediation file. April 2nd. Petitioners reject proposed non-guardianship arrangement. It's in the minutes. The hum of the HVAC was the only sound for a moment. Then the judge looked at Elijah. Mr. Brooks, he said, do you understand these proceedings and your financial responsibilities? Elijah rose. His knees ached. The room blurred briefly. I do, Your Honor. His voice was even. I know every bill. I've written every number, and I never missed one. He glanced once toward Damon, not cold, not angry, just honest. I'm not confused. I'm not failing. I'm living. The courtroom didn't move, not even Liana. Judge McCall lowered his eyes to the binder, flipped a page, read, then set the binder down. Guardianship denied. Langley opened his mouth. McCall raised his hand. Additionally, the court orders the petitioners to cover 50% of the respondent's legal fees. The petition lacked substantial merit. Gavel struck, not loud, but final. Freedom, the judge said, is the least restrictive measure. Elijah sat. Mona exhaled quietly. She began packing the documents. Elijah stood and extended his hand. You made the case, he said. You lived it, she replied. Go home, Mr. Brooks. You've earned peace. As he left the courthouse, light poured through the high windows. Dust danced in the beams. Behind him, voices tangled. Liana's sharp, Damon's low. But he didn't turn, not even when Damon called softly, Dad. Elijah kept walking. At the top of the steps, he stopped. A city breeze lifted his collar. A car rolled by, gospel chords faint through the window. Case closed, he said. The courthouse doors swung shut behind him, sealing echoes inside. Sunlight fell on a man who proved order can stand its ground. Elijah unlocked the front door with the same care he'd used for 30 years. But today, it felt different. No longer the gate of a lonely outpost or the waiting room of dread. The house met him with still air, familiar dust, and the faintest scent of lavender from an old plug-in. Stacks of documents still covered the kitchen table. Exhibit folders, receipts, declarations, all the arsenal he'd leaned on. He ran a hand over them, then lifted the court-stamped dismissal order and his old ledger. The rest he gathered slowly into a box. Back to quiet routes, he said softly. The phone buzzed. Damon's name. That familiar drop in his chest tried to return, but it didn't land. Elijah stared at the screen for 3 full rings before picking up. Dad, I'm sorry, Damon's voice rasped. I lost the thread. I thought we were helping. Elijah let the silence hold. I know, he said finally, but that thread's yours to carry now. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I know, Elijah said again. I forgive you, but I won't manage your life or your bills. That part's done. Okay, Damon whispered. The call ended with a soft click that echoed louder than anger. Elijah walked to the back room. A thin box sat in the drawer, tucked beneath old tax files and a pack of stamps. Inside, his postal badge, polished brass dulled only slightly by time. He held it in his palm, its weight still true. He didn't pin it on. Instead, he placed it atop the stack of ledgers on his desk, its shine catching the light. Order's enough. That afternoon, Eleanor came up the walk holding 2 things, a tall glass of sweet tea and a manila envelope. Don't start, he said, spotting her grin. Too late. I pulled it from the docket. Had the clerk print you a copy. She handed over the dismissal order in full, stamped and sealed. Frame it, she said. Proof that quiet folks can win. They sat on the porch under the slow-turning fan. Ice clinked. She didn't press. That evening, Mona called. Her tone was lighter than Elijah had ever heard. "Fee orders logged," she said. "We're officially closed." "No more forms?" he teased. She laughed. "Keep a copy of everything, for peace, not paranoia." Elijah nodded, even though she couldn't see. "You kept your dignity," Mona added. "That's rarer than victory." Sunday came with sun and soft organ chords. At service, hands found his shoulder, quiet pats, murmured praise. It made him itch with attention, but he held his place. Offered a nod here, a faint smile there. "Good to see you stand tall, Mr. Brooks," someone whispered. He bowed his head. That night, he sat at his desk, wrote Damon a short note. "Life's long, son. Keep your word and your name. That's enough." He looked at the envelope, then tucked it between 2 pages of the ledger instead. Rain fell the next morning, soft and steady. Elijah drove out past the highway curve, past the old gas station, to where Margie lay beneath the rows of trimmed grass and headstones. He brought fresh chrysanthemums, removed the wilted batch, and stood without umbrella. "I won," he said. "They tried to put me on a shelf, but I held my place." He knelt and placed the flowers gently. "Your boy's learning the hard way," he added, "but he'll find footing. Maybe slower than we hoped." He pulled an old church bulletin from his coat and slipped it into his wallet. One Margie had written notes on, verses underlined, names circled. Back home, he opened the ledger. So many pages, each line a memory. The roof patch in 09, Damon's books in 13, Margie's medicine in the last winter before. He turned to the last entry, court date, ruling, fee order. One blank page followed. He took his pen and wrote, "June, peace achieved." The pen glided. The hum of the fan filled the space. "No more entries owed," he said. He closed the ledger with a soft thump. Outside, fireflies blinked on the porch rail, tiny verdicts glowing in rhythm. The house breathed, not with ghosts, but with mercy and space and quiet. The ledger closes with a soft thump. Outside, fireflies blink like tiny verdicts of mercy. Elijah rose before dawn, the same way he had for most of his life. The habit was older than grief, older than paperwork. He moved through the house on quiet feet, the rhythm of his mornings unbroken. The coffee pot hissed. The gospel station hummed faintly from the counter radio. The walls, once heavy with echoes, felt lighter now. For a moment, he caught himself listening for Margie's hum or Damon's teenage shuffle. But there was only the sound of the spoon against the cup. He filled the silence himself, a low whistle under his breath. "Same rhythm," he said, voice small but sure. "New peace." The house, old but faithful, seemed to breathe with him. Later he crossed to Eleanor's porch. She already had 2 glasses of sweet tea waiting, condensation running down the sides. The fan above them turned slow as a heartbeat. "He came back last week," Elijah said. "Didn't ask for money, just talked." Eleanor nodded, rocking gently. "About time he did some talking." Elijah sipped. "Still feels wrong, the distance." "Boundaries ain't walls, baby," she said. "They're doors that open slow. When you ready, you walk through. When you not, you rest a while." He smiled. "You make it sound simple." "It ain't simple," she said. "Just necessary." The porch fell into companionable silence, cicadas buzzing steady, the world turning slow and safe for once. By Friday, Mona's workshop at the senior center drew a crowd. Retirees, widowers, a few kids with clipboards from the community college. Elijah sat in the back until Mona called him forward. "Mr. Brooks has something real to share," she said. He stood, the microphone wobbling slightly in his hand. "They said I was forgetful," he began. "Said I needed protection, but every mark I made, every number I wrote, it was care. For myself, for my family, for the life I worked for." He took a breath. Silence don't mean surrender. Order's how some of us speak when the world stops listening. Applause rippled through the room. He nodded once, then sat. His fingers felt steadier than they had in months. Days later, a certified envelope slid through the mail slot. Elijah recognized the county seal. He tore it open with careful fingers. Inside, proof that Damon and Liana had paid their share of the court fees. No appeal, no dispute. He exhaled, the sound soft as the paper he folded. "Debt closed," he said, filing it away in the folder marked Final. Twilight was falling when the gate creaked open again. Damon stood outside, holding a potted fern. Eyes lowered. The plant looked too green for his shaking hands. Elijah's pulse jumped, quick as it had during the hearings. He gripped the porch rail to steady himself. "Come on, son," he said finally. "Sit a spell." They sat side by side, the boards creaking under their weight. Crickets filled the quiet. "She took a job out west," Damon said. "I'm staying, trying to work things out." Elijah didn't respond at first. The urge to fix it lingered, like an old reflex, but he kept his palms flat on his knees. "You'll get there," he said. "Just don't rush the growing. Roots don't listen when you talk too loud." Damon managed a small smile. The fern sat between them, a strange peace offering. After a while, Elijah rose, went inside, and came back with something folded. A church bulletin. He held it out. "Your mother wrote this one Sunday," he said. "Been keeping it in my wallet since." Damon unfolded it. Margie's handwriting looped across the margin. "Buy flowers for yourself sometimes." Elijah pointed to the line. "Even love needs tending, boy, especially when you're the only one around to water it." The words hung there until Damon nodded, eyes shining. Morning by morning, Elijah began walking the neighborhood again. The sidewalks cracked in the same places. The air carried the same mix of exhaust and honeysuckle. Neighbors waved. Some stopped him with questions. "Mr. Brooks, how'd you keep your record so clean?" "Mr. Brooks, how'd you stay calm through all that mess?" He answered kindly, but never too long. He helped where it didn't cost his quiet. When Mona called a few weeks later, her voice was lighter. "You ever think about teaching this stuff?" she teased. "Self-advocacy for seniors, led by Elijah Brooks." He laughed. "Retired from paperwork, remember?" She chuckled. "I kept your story in my training binder. Redacted, of course, but it'll teach my interns something real." He smiled into the receiver. "Make it a lesson, not a warning. You want credit? Nah, let quiet help speak loud." That weekend, he opened a fresh ledger. The first line he wrote read, "July, Brooks Foundation of Order created." It wasn't grand, just a modest community account, partnered with Mona's office, designed to fund workshops for older folks learning to guard their assets. A few classes, a few printed guides. He hesitated before writing his own name in ink. Then he did. "Let quiet help speak loud," he said again, signing beneath it. That night, the air outside was warm but forgiving. Elijah sat on the porch with the lights off, listening to crickets, the hum of distant cars, the turning of the fan behind him. He thought of Margie, her laughter spilling through this same doorway years ago. He missed her. That never changed, but she would have been proud. "Peace ain't empty," he said into the dark. "It's earned." Inside, the house glowed faintly from a single lamp over his desk. The court order, his postal badge, and the new ledger rested side by side. He turned off the light. The badge caught the last trace of gold before the room fell still. Route complete, he whispered. Outside, dawn began again, slow, certain, unhurried. Order restored, not as control, but as peace. The end. Every family holds tension between love and control. But reclaiming your dignity without losing your heart, that's its own kind of courage. If you've ever had to draw a line to protect your peace, your name, or your independence, share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Please comment 1 if you liked the video, comment 0 if you didn't, and feel free to share why so I can keep improving the content for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support means more than you know.